Why is my computer not working? Hi honeys! Welcome back to my spooky channel where I'm here to satisfy all your spooky needs. I hope you enjoyed the last few videos. If you haven't seen them, go check them out. So I'm actually really spooked out to do this one because it's really late at night and I'm all alone, so it's great. And I don't know why, but these kind of things, this kind of thing, I don't know how to explain it, but it just freaks me out so much. It's just definitely this and clowns. Just gets me. I'm sure you're all dying to know what it is, so let's get spooky. Today we will be talking about Robert the doll. Dolls just freak me out so much. Okay, Robert the doll is a legend in the spooky paranormal world, and he is in a museum at Key West, Florida, which I will be talking about a little later. But let's start at the very beginning. In the early 1900s, Eugene Robert Otto was a little boy living in Key West and was given a doll by one of his servants. This doll was handmade and it was a life-size doll, and by life-size I mean it was the size of a small child. One theory of this doll is that the servant who gave Eugene the doll cursed it because she was just fired because she was caught using black magic and voodoo. Another theory of how she cursed the doll was that the doll is made out of human hair. Ugh. Little Eugene Robert Otto quickly became attached to the doll and he named it Robert after himself. After doing this, he started going by the nickname Gene because Robert was the doll's name and not his. Gene would bring the doll with him everywhere. Every time he went out, every time he went to play, he would feed Robert at the dinner table. He would get Robert ready in the morning. He would get Robert ready for bed, tuck him into bed. He would just have him with him all the time. He was super attached. His parents and servants would often hear Gene and Robert talking to each other, but they would hear them talking to each other in two different voices. When Gene was talking, it was this normal child voice, but when Robert was supposedly talking back, it was this really low, deep voice that could not naturally come from a child that small. Things began to move on their own and started to get more and more strange. And anytime something happened, Gene would blame it on Robert. For example, if toys went missing or if toys were found broken, Gene would immediately just say that Robert did it. One time a plumber was hired to work on the outside of the house and he heard a child's laughter from a room, but Gene was not home at the time. So he looked around and he saw that Robert the doll moved from one side of the room to the complete opposite side of the room when no one else was home. One night when Gene was only 10 years old, he woke up in the middle of the night to find Robert the doll sitting at the edge of his bed staring at him. That same night, his mother woke up to hearing Gene screaming for help, and she heard furniture moving around. She was finally able to break through the locked door, and she saw Gene curled up in his bed, crying and sobbing, and all he could say was, "Robert did it, Robert did it, Robert did it." And she saw Robert the doll sitting at the edge of the bed, staring at them. After this night, Gene's attitude quickly changed and he started to become more easily irritated and angered, so his mom asked what was wrong or if anything was bothering him, and every time he would always say that he got into a fight with Robert, or Robert was upset with him, or he said this to Robert and Robert didn't like it. He would always just blame Robert. Sometimes neighbors walking by claimed to see the doll staring at them. They felt his gaze on them. Some of the neighbors saw Robert moving from window to window as they walked by. I mean, if I saw that, I would call the cops or move to a completely different state, maybe out of the country. But this was also the 1900s, so none of that is plausible, and I'm also being dramatic. Anyway, they would always see Robert just doing something creepy. Household objects were going missing, they were moving around, they were being thrown around rooms. The parents and the servants could hear laughter coming from empty rooms, and it was giggling like a child is what they said. Toys were going missing and they were found broken in different parts of the house. All of this was just getting too much for the family, so the parents decided to put Robert into a box and they put him in an attic where he spent a lot of the following years. After this happened, Gene quickly changed attitudes and he lived a normal, happy childhood for the rest of his years. Gene grew up, he became a famous artist, he was living on his own, he had a wife, and then his dad died. and his dad left the family home in his will. So Gene moved back to this house, and he decided to make the attic his own personal studio. So when he was moving stuff around to make his studio, he found the box with Robert in it. Of course, like he did as a child, he immediately became attached to Robert again. He would do the same things as he did when he was a child. He would eat with him, he would bring him everywhere. He would prop up Robert in a chair right next to him and his wife's bed as he slept. His wife, of course, hated this. I mean, who wouldn't? So he decided to prop Robert up facing the window. Once again, neighbors would walk past the house, they would see Robert in the window, and they could just feel his gaze on them. So apparently the wife just went insane and died. And then a few years later, Gene died, but Robert was left in the house. 13 years later, a new family moved in, and strange things immediately started happening to them. Sometimes when family members went into a room by themselves where Robert was, they would go about their business, grabbing whatever they needed to, doing whatever they wanted to do. But once they were trying to leave, the door would be closed and locked, and they couldn't get out. So they were locked in a room alone with Robert. They heard laughter from rooms. They heard footsteps from rooms that people weren't in. They just experienced a lot of the same things that Gene experienced as a child. They moved out, and in 1974, a woman named Myrtle moved in. Myrtle had a daughter that would play with Robert, and not much was said about her childhood, except now she's around 50 years old, and when asked about it, all she says she remembers is one night she woke up to Robert trying to kill her. And that's all she'll say about it because she's too scared to talk about him and talk about her experiences as a child. One, because she doesn't remember a lot of it, and two, because she's afraid that just talking about him or bringing it up will bring his energy or spirit or just something negative around her. They experienced other things while they were living in that house. Myrtle said she would find Robert in different places than where she had left him. When people visited and they were talking negatively about the past owners, such as the family or of Eugene, they could see the doll's demeanor and facial expression change. I don't really know what that means, but I definitely do not want to find out for sure. They would hear giggling, footsteps, and whenever they were in a room with Robert, they could just feel his gaze on them at all times. I mean, I hate the feeling of being watched, but the feeling of being watched by a doll just seems like 100 times worse. One time, Myrtle woke up in the middle of the night because she heard a child's laugh, and she saw Robert sitting at the edge of her bed with a knife laying right next to him. In 1994, 20 years after Myrtle moved into that house, she moved out and donated Robert to the Fort East Martello Museum in Key West, Florida. That is where Robert is now located, and he's over 110 years old. He's in a glass box, and he's locked up, but that does not mean you are safe if you go to visit him. If you go to visit Robert, you have to be extremely polite and respectful towards him. If you want a picture of him or with him, you have to ask politely. And if you treat him with disrespect or you take a picture without asking, then apparently he curses you. The museum says they get around 1 to 3 letters a day addressed to Robert apologizing for being disrespectful to him and asking for them to lift the curse he has on them. Apparently Gene used to feed Robert candy when they were at the dinner table or wherever they were. He would just always try to feed Robert candy. So a lot of people started sending candy in with their apology letters. There's a whole room at the museum full of letters and candy, all addressed to Robert. People see him move in the box. They see his facial expression change. If people aren't facing the box, they'll hear tapping. And some people, when they turn around, they have seen his hand placed up against the glass. So disturbing. A lot of employees, they say it's so normal for them to come in the next morning and see Robert in a different position than he was the night before. One employee was cleaning at night, and the next morning he came in to see Robert in a totally different position with dust all over his feet. It's a rule that 2 employees must always be closing. There cannot be one because sometimes doors are locked, sometimes the lights shut off, and just so many different things happen that it's safer and important for them to have 2 employees at all times. You can go visit Robert at this museum, and don't worry, the employees will train you how to politely interact with him. And they say even if you're a skeptic or you think it's stupid, whatever it is, you have to treat him with respect, because why even test that? I mean, if people that work here are telling me not to treat a doll with disrespect because I'm gonna get cursed, like, heck yeah, I'm gonna listen to them. I'm not gonna try to see if that's true for myself. I mean, I'll send someone else to do it, but it sure won't be me. So that was Robert the doll, and I know this was a shorter one, but it just gets me. I mean, just something about dolls, even American Girl dolls, I never liked them. I had one and I didn't like her so much. I used to draw all over her face. I would like cut her hair and everything. She was so beaten up and ugly that my dad sent her to the American Girl doll hospital to get her fixed, but that's a spooky story for another time. Anyway, it's just something about dolls just freaks me out. I don't know why. It's just why dolls? Why? I just don't understand. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you had a spooky time with this one. I will see you all soon. Bye, honeys! I wish they made, like, you know those tiny hands that go on your fingers? I wish they made that, but like these spooky hands. Can you imagine what I would do with like 10 of these little things on my fingers? I would have the time of my life. I honestly would just never have to leave. I would just have so much fun.